lines cut for a minute. Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. If you like the video today, please come in and share it. We'll surely appreciate it here on 100 Yards of Football. If you think you're a college football fan and an NFL fan, today you'll enjoy the video because our legend video today is a college and NFL legend, Jim McMahon, quarterback, BYU University, by way of the Chicago Bears, by way of the Philadelphia Eagles, by way of the San Diego Chargers. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. So if you like the video, I'm going to say it one more time. Please come in and share it. And joining me is a young man who played 11 years in the National Football League. He was on some great teams. The Atlanta Falcons of 1991, the Philadelphia Eagles of the early 90s. And he knows all about this game. But the most important tidbit is that he played at Colorado State. And he got to see this gentleman right here in live and living color, Jim McMahon, do his thing at BYU. So if you like the video, please come in and share it. Harper, how you doing this morning, sir?
Well, good morning. We get to talk about a guy who was a foe before he was a friend. But what a amazing record holder, influencer, and obviously a champion in so many different ways. We get to talk about Jim McMahon, and you may love him, you may hate him, but one thing about him, you got to admit, man, he's one of those guys you would want to have leading your team down the field. He was an amazing quarterback. He didn't have the strongest arm, but he had a strong arm. He didn't have a weak arm, don't get me wrong, but his accuracy, oh my goodness, his ability to get the ball in your hands and let you do something with it. His ability to read the field is like no others. I'm just amazed at him and his athleticism and his ability to take your football team, no matter who you have on it. He'll take the runs, he'll take the warts, he'll take it all, but he'll get you down the field and score a touchdown. Jim McMahon.
When I was in college from 1978 to 1982, there was a lot of quarterbacks back at that time that was getting a lot of love, like Art Schlichter, who's under center at Ohio State, John Forcade at Ole Miss, of course, Bud Ballou at the University of Georgia. And when you look at the quarterback position back then, they didn't throw the ball a lot back then during that era, especially when you played at Colorado State in your career, I believe from 81 to 85. And I always wondered, because you will hear afar, me being down in the South, afar, about why they throwing for so many yards up there at BYU, up there in Utah. And especially me coming from a situation where down south, and you're talking about great quarterbacks at the time, Archie Manning. Then out west, Jim Plunkett. Then you looking at Reggie Collier, Willie Towton. Those are the guys that I kind of followed back then, but I didn't have no word about Jim McMahon, even though BYU was putting up them numbers. But I'm going to tell you what, I became a believer. You know where I'm going, Harper. Home for the holidays, eating mom's good old collard greens, turkey and dressing, being around dad at the table. The holiday bowl comes on. So me at the University of Arkansas at that time, and of course I knew all about SMU. I knew about the Pony Express, but they were young.
Ponies.
But they were young at the time.
Those ponies, woo-woo. Watch the ponies run.
They were young at that time with Eric Dickerson and Craig James. But they were 45-25 with about, I want to say, 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And BYU came behind and won that football game. It was crazy. And I remember that Hail Mary pass from Jim McMahon to that receiver, Clay Brown. But during that process, I said, that gentleman right there can throw that football, man. I'm going to start following BYU. I know they had great, I want to say, tradition there because they had Mark Wilson, Robbie Bosco, Steve Young. But that gentleman right there, after I saw him, what he did in the Holiday Bowl, I followed him the next season. 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. Now, I'm going to let you have the floor.
Yeah, what a difference maker Jim was. That was his junior year. against the Ponies, 42-25, I believe, with about 4.5 minutes left to go. And they score 3 touchdowns. They end up winning that game. That was the beginning of the madness behind Jim McMahon, and madness in a good way. He and Mark Wilson, they played together. Gifford Nielsen was another quarterback that before Jim had started to open the eyes of people around the football world that BYU's for real. They built a stadium that's as nice as anything that's out there. You get about 65,000 the capacity. They invested into their football program back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I got to play in the stadium. Gosh, the paint was still drying. It was amazing. This was 82. But my first appearance against that young man, I was a freshman at CSU. And BYU rolls into Fort Collins, Colorado. And there's a little bit of a story that goes with this. Jim McMahon was the offensive captain. Kyle Whittingham was the defensive captain. And their job under Lavelle Edwards was to do bed check on Friday night. So they traveled from Provo. They get into Fort Collins. They have a walkthrough. They have their meetings. It's time to go to bed. And Jim and Kyle would knock on your door. You could travel with 60, so there were about 29 other doors that they would knock on. Hey, guys. Hey, play well tomorrow. Hey, guys. You in bed? All right, good deal. Play well tomorrow. Hey, guys, get some rest, man. Turn the TV off. Get some rest. We got a big game tomorrow. When they were done with bench check, they went into Lavelle Edwards' suite, and he was having a meeting with a couple of the coaches. And they said, Coach, everybody's in. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Jim and Kyle leave. They go down the hallway, and their room is to the right, but Jim goes to the left. He goes to the stairwell. He goes downstairs. There's a taxi cab meeting him, and he says, take me to the party. So he found a couple places, and I have a buddy of mine that says, man, we tried our best to drink him under the table until 2 or 3 in the morning. The following day, Jim is throwing the ball left and right and down the middle, and it was unbelievable. It was 35-0 at halftime. He had already thrown 5 touchdowns. He comes back out in the second half, throws 2 more. He has 7 touchdowns. They pull him in the fourth quarter for some other guy, number 8. Gosh, what was his name? Steve Young, I think was his name. What a talented group of, Tier 2 players. This isn't SEC or Pac-10, Pac-12 football. This is the next level down, mid-majors, if you will. And Jim was certainly a star amongst stars at that level. And what a great quarterback he was at BYU. Gosh, he was so stinking good at finding the open receiver and getting the ball to him and letting him gain 5 or 8 yards. And then another 5 or 8 yards. And then 12 yards. Then 5 or 8 again. Then 20. And by the time he was all done, Vincent, this is what amazes me. I thought it was 59. He had 70 NCAA records for passing. Unbelievable. So in and of himself. Now, a few have been broken since then, but Jim McMahon knew the field. He understood the game, and he was just a guy that was better than everybody else.
And he left college at a time in 82. Remember, me and Harper was along that timeline. Harper is 3 years younger than me. And remember, Harper, that they didn't throw the ball back then, man.
Not as much as they do now. Yeah, but BYU sure did. They sure did.
That's my point, because when you look at McMahon, he threw for almost 9,536 yards and 84 touchdowns. If he was in this era now, that probably, would we add another 4,000 or 5,000 yards on that? And maybe another 20, 30 touchdowns? Because he was throwing that rock back then. But I'm going to say this about Jim McMahon. When he finished his career at BYU, and then my father's, how you doing this morning, Dad? Chester Turner down there in Memphis, Tennessee.
Hey, Chester.
That's my dad's favorite team, the Chicago Bears. He loves some Willie Gallimore and Walter Payton. Ingar says, when the Bears drafted him, I said, they're finna get that thing turned around in the Windy City. And the one thing I noticed about Jim McMahon is that pound for pound, he was probably the toughest quarterback that I ever seen play. And the only other quarterback, when I'm talking about leadership, poise, getting your people to follow you, that's very critical. as a football player, Harper, you can help me out on that because you played at a high level. And he had that factor. And it's only one other quarterback that I've seen in my lifetime during the time I was in college that can carry his team now. Because Jim McMahon was everything for BYU. He put that team on his back. And I put him in the same category. When I seen this gentleman come to the Liberty Bowl Stadium, I was, I think, 8 years old. No, 7 years old, because it was his first game as a true college quarterback. And he was out of Drew, Mississippi, by the name of Archie Manning, who can really carry his team. And what I say about that, back then, when you talked about Ole Miss, nobody talked about anybody else, no other player. They might mention the coach John Vaught, but they said Archie Manning. He was must-see TV. That's how it was with Jim McMahon. Same type of scenario. When you mentioned BYU in 1981, everybody said, man, they got something special out there. That guy out there throwing that football in Provo. And when he got to the Chicago Bears, they already had Walter Payton, they had Otis Wilson, and they needed somebody to take them over the top. Keith Van Horn, Dan Hampton. He was the missing piece, man. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, Jim was, he was a savant, I guess you could say. The way that he played and understood football from the quarterback position and reading defenses and knowing what you were going to do and having an answer to the blitz that you were going to bring or the zone coverage that you were going to sit in, or if you went to man, he knew what to do instantaneously. A lot of guys get it, but they don't do it well on the field. Jim did both. He not only got it, understood it, but he would put you in a position, as you mentioned, Clay Brown, Glenn Kozlowski, Gordon Hudson, guys that you never heard of, right? Because they were great at BYU, but they couldn't make it at the next level. They just weren't fast enough. They weren't big enough. They weren't strong enough. They were big, they were fast, they were strong, but not big enough to get to the next level. And Jim would feature you. He would get you the ball. And when he goes into Chicago, he gets drafted by the Bears. The very first meeting that he had was with a beer in his hand. He brought one with him. And Ditka didn't like it, and George Halas didn't like it, and nobody in the organization understood it. But that's the kind of person that Jim was. The players loved it because he was the guy that would be able to rub the feathers of the authority and let the players have a little more fun or enjoy their moments. And Jim was able to make that happen. He was a catalyst for that. He loved having fun. He loved it when Walter would, and he called him Wally. Who would do that? Who would call him Wally? Everyone in the world would call him Mr. Walter Payton, right? But he called him Wally because he was his friend. And Walter loved him. And the offensive linemen, Bortz and Thayer, and you mentioned Van Horn and Jimbo Covert, man, they loved this guy. They wanted to block for him. And even on defense, you hate the guy that's on offense if you're a defensive guy, and that never changes. But you learn to respect Jim because Jim was the one guy that could get that group of knuckleheads to get them together and get them for a common goal. And think of any other. Your father, you mentioned that he loves the Bears. Who's been a great Bears quarterback previous to that? Bobby Douglas? Bobby could only run. Vince Evans? Vince couldn't make it in Chicago. But here's the thing that Jim could do. He could throw into the wind, and he would still get you the ball. It wasn't accurate, but he was the one guy. And it's a graveyard for – look at any other visiting quarterback that would play outdoors in December. The stats are staggering that nobody can throw the ball because the wind is blowing too hard. But Jim was able to do it, plus he had a running game, and then he had this great defense that nobody could score against. It was a recipe for success. And I'm surprised, really I am, that it didn't last even longer than what it did. 84 was a very good year. They go to the championship game. They lose to the 49ers. They win it all in 85. 86, Jim was hurt throughout most of the year, and it started to break apart. People started to leave. And next thing you know, he's in Chicago without anybody else to help him. But he had a great time while he was there.
When you think about McMahon, the one thing I'm going to take to my grave and one thing I'm going to be proud of is that I know the Miami Dolphins are the only undefeated team in National Football League history. But man, if we want to be really and true to ourselves and look in the mirror, that 1985 Chicago Bears team is the greatest single season team ever. Ever. The players, unbelievable. Richard Dent, Tennessee State, Perry, Clemson. Oh my God, man. Mike Singletary, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael, Willie Gault, as we mentioned earlier on our Tennessee podcast, Walter, Dennis McKinnon, the offensive line, Jimbo Covert, who you just mentioned. But think about the domination they had that season. They shut out two teams in the playoffs, did not allow a point. In the playoffs, they only allowed 10 points. And then they beat Dallas that year 44-0. Atlanta 36-0. No disrespect to the former Falcons out there. They beat the Redskins 45-10. That was still good. And they beat Frisco 26-10. And that gentleman right there was under center. And the thing that really stuck in my mind, he didn't have great stats really throwing the football, but Chicago beat you up physically when he was under center on both sides of the ball. You talking about domination from the 85 season, and this gentleman, to me, being on the greatest team ever. Hey, man, it's not going to be another season like that in another team. I'm sorry. That 46 defense with Buddy Ryan, but it was him. I'm going to say it one more time. It was something he had at the quarterback position. He had the ability to lead people, man. And pound for pound, he was tough. And the injuries he endured. You don't see a lot of football players at that position that come along like Jim McMahon. I don't want to hear about, well, he didn't put up the stats like a Peyton Manning or Dan Marino, or he won 7 championships like Tom Brady. No disrespect to them. But Jim McMahon is one of my top 3 quarterbacks ever in this game because he played it pound for pound with toughness. Back to you, Mr. LaBelle.
Yeah, if you look at the picture that's up on the screen right now, it's on our right, but his left leg, look at his knee. Look at that big wrap that he's got around him. He was an option quarterback in high school, but he could throw. He didn't have the strongest arm, but he could throw it, and he was accurate, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. And throwing in Chicago, that is not easy to do. Now, throwing in the Provo in that light air, okay, you get a little extra lift with that ball, but he was able to hit the zones. There wasn't a throw he couldn't make. He didn't have the same arm strength that Jim Kelly had or Elway or Marino. But think about this, folks. You mentioned something, Vincent, about the only undefeated team was the Miami Dolphins. And wouldn't it be interesting how the football gods put this together? The only loss that the Bears had that year was on a Monday night game in Miami. So maybe Mercury Morris and Jim Kick and Paul Warfield and Larry Zonka all had it out. They had that little mojo going to where they go, we're not going to lose our undefeated season status to these Chicago Bears. We're going to take them out and let them all have a night out on Saturday, and then they're going to play sloppy on Monday. Who knows? But the fact that that team, if you think about them in their prime against the prime team of Miami Dolphins, it'd be a 3-0 final because both teams had fantastic defenses and had average offenses, but they were just good enough to be able to beat you. You didn't have to win by 21 points. You just have to win by 1. And they were able to do it 14 times in the Dolphin heyday and 15-1 for that Chicago team that still people from Chicago, and I'm sure your dad and friends of mine that know everything about that team, all the players, all the things, the Super Bowl shuffle, and the sunglasses that Jim had, the headbands, everything about that Super Bowl run was just an amazing team, and one that people that were around in that time will say that was a part of NFL history that puts a smile on your face. You may not like the Bears. You may be from you may be from Detroit or Minnesota, Green Bay. Oh, I hate the Bears. But you have to admit that that one team was fun. They were entertaining, and they were a joy to watch.
And I think, and I'm going to go back in time, and you go back to the 1981, excuse me, All-American football team. And you think the players that are on that team that made first team consensus All-American, Marcus Allen, Herschel Walker, Anthony Carter, Roy Foster, USC. And you think about Jim McMahon. And still to this day, I think people still don't give him the quality of respect that we should give him. Because when you look at football players, and I always judge this when I'm looking at my life and looking at the game. And I remember as a coach, my PE teacher told me in the 7th grade, Coach Brian Grice, I was at Longview Junior High. He said, it's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. It's the impact you make. It's no excuse. Because if you're a leader, I don't care if you're playing at Choo-Choo State, you're going to make people find you. And that's what Jim McMahon, that I'm going to take with me, what he did at BYU. That's why I was not really surprised at the success he had with the Chicago Bears. And you brought it up early in this podcast. It's a shame that team didn't win like 2 or 3 Super Bowls, because that was a very talented team with a very good, strong quarterback who knew the position. And I'm going to say it for the 50th time. He had people that was willing to run through that door for him. The Freds loved Jim McMahon. Walter Payton loved this guy. Willie Gault loved this guy. Otis Wilson loved this guy. And that defense, hey man, that 85 season, I wouldn't care if they paid me, $20,000 to go on the field. I wouldn't done that, because you would have been hurt. That's what I'm going to take with me when I think about Jim McMahon. One of the toughest, maybe the best pound for pound, toughest quarterbacks to play this game at a high level that don't get his due respect. Back to you, Harper.
Well, you mentioned leadership, and that's exactly what Jim brought with him wherever he went. When I was in Philadelphia, Jim was near the end of his career. You know, he wasn't playing much. He was going to be a backup. But we went bowling. Jim was one of the ones to start that. On Monday nights when we didn't play on Monday, he wanted us to all get together. And it didn't matter who you were or what you did. Didn't matter. But if you're on the team, he wanted you to come to that. And I remember him coming by the locker one day. He goes, hey, man, we're all getting together on Monday, and we're going to go down that bowling alley. I go, I don't have a ball, Jim. He goes, I'll get you a ball. I just want you to be there. I want everybody to go, and it's a time for us to have a beer or just hang out and get to know each other. We would do stuff like that in Chicago all the time. So his leadership carried over into other areas in your football life, to where you'd want to hang out and you'd want to love your brother. You want to take care of your guys. You fight a little bit harder for people that mean something to you. And Jim, in that Holiday Bowl that you watched, he told the team, he goes, well, this isn't over. We're going to win this ball game. And one touchdown led to another touchdown, led to that third touchdown, and they won it. And you believe in the guy. Walter believed in him when he goes, you are going to be the leading rusher. You are going to win a Super Bowl. You are going to be a champion. And Willie Gault, everybody that you mentioned, the defense learned to respect him. The offense certainly did. Whenever they scored a touchdown, who would he go to first? He'd go to his offensive lineman, and he'd butt heads with them. And I mean, it led to a few of the concussions that he had, but it wasn't mean or derogatory. It's we're all together. So that leadership is something that obviously stuck out. 70 records have Jim McMahon's name to it in the NCAA before he got there. He knew what he was doing. It's not the Hall of Facts. It's not the Hall of Statistics. It's the Hall of Fame. And Jim certainly made the game better. I mean, can you imagine anyone talking about him more than what John Madden did in some of those playoff games? He goes, you take a good team and then you add a guy like Jim McMahon, and now they're a great team. Madden loved Jim McMahon. He loved his playfulness. He loved his ability. He would have been a great Raider. I'm sure he would have, because he would have told John to stick it when he needed to. And he'd also say, John, this is what we're going to do to win the ball game. Ditka didn't have that same relationship with him. Hollis did not have. You remember, George Hollis was still alive when Jim got there in Chicago. And George wanted more quarterback sneaks. On his deathbed, he told Mike Ditka, we need to sneak the ball more with our quarterback. We need to get that guy to be more involved. And Jim would do stuff like that. He's just an amazing guy and a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, whether you vote for him or not. I don't care about, what his yardage was. I care about whether or not he won, whether or not he dominated his position. And for obvious reasons, all throughout his career, he was the guy that was going to make your team better if he was on it.
Right quick, before we end today, speak on the relationship that he had with Pete Rozelle. Why did that go back and forth?
Well, Jim didn't like to be told what to do. And he put Adidas on the headband. He had a headband that didn't have a name on it, and he wore Adidas shoes, so he put Adidas on it. And he was on TV a lot, obviously. The head coaches are on all the time. Walter would be on all the time. And instead of putting a hat on, like most quarterbacks do now, they've got that hat. They get paid to do that. Jim wore a sweatband. And he got a couple extra bucks from Adidas to do that. And Rozelle said, no, you can't do it. So for the championship game, his little sign of mockery was to wear a headband. And right before the game, he was told he couldn't wear a headband, so he put one on. That's his rebellious side. And he put Pete's name on it. In the Super Bowl, he put Pluto. That was his nickname for one of his best friends. So Jim didn't care. Tell me what to do or tell me not what to do. I'm going to do it anyways. And that's the rebellion, a part of him that the other players loved, the fact that he would stick it to the man, so to speak, and stick a finger up in the air to somebody telling him what he could and couldn't do. He didn't appreciate that. But he was one of the few guys that would get away with it. Everybody else were golden boys. They go, okay, Mr. Commissioner, okay, Mr. League, Mr. NFL, I'll do what you tell me to do. Not Jim.
And when you we go back and look at him, and I totally agree with you. If I had a vote, definitely he'd be in the Hall of Fame, just based on the fact that what he did in that 85 season with the Chicago Bears. And I'm glad you brought that up this morning. I'm not a guy that's too much in the stats. I look at really what you do on the field. And you know this, Harper. Like I said, you played in the league 11 years. When you leave this game, and I'm going to ask you a major question here, because I'm going to get inside your heart. What would it mean? Because you said something before we started today here on 100 Yards Football. What would it mean if you had a Super Bowl ring?
Well, doesn't that change everything for you? If you win an Olympic gold medal, you're always introduced as Olympic gold medalist and fill in the blank, whatever your name is. So Jim has two, right? He won one with the Packers. He was backing up Favre when he was with Green Bay near the end of his career. And how many more do you need to win? Terry Bradshaw on stats alone would never be in the Hall of Fame because Terry had very average numbers. No disrespect to Terry, but he's got 4 rings. He's a no-brainer. 4. And he was a part of a great championship team in Pittsburgh and another team in Pittsburgh and another team and out of 4th. He was part of that. And there's no doubt that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Does Jim McMahon belong in the Hall of Fame based on his numbers alone? No, absolutely not. He couldn't. And a lot of other guys wouldn't. But his fame, because it is the Hall of Fame, and his Super Bowl and that run that they had, one of the best ever, and his leadership qualities and abilities, there isn't any bear out there going, Jim needs to be a part of this. And there are several, Richard Dent being one that's wearing a gold jacket. I know Richard would say that, you know what, this is incomplete until the rest of my guys get in. Walter had one. Who else? Steve McMichael just got in. But how do you avoid? Do you have to wait for Jim to die before you do it, like they did with Ken Stabler? Come on, do it right, NFL. Get Jim in and make everything okay with you'll never be embarrassed about having him in. He might make a few people laugh at you, but he deserves to be a part of the game's past and its history because of what he was able to accomplish on the field. No doubt about it.
If you liked the video this morning, please comment and share it. We just finished talking about one of the greatest players that ever played this game at the quarterback position. Jim McMahon, As Mr. Harper LaBelle just said, he's got 2 Super Bowl rings. To me, it's not about the stats. It's about this gold, that gold jewelry. Because as Mr. LaBelle just said, when you're introduced and you have some functions, it sounds good to be introduced as a Super Bowl champion. And that carries you for the rest of your life. This game is about being champions, man. That's what greatness is about, in my opinion. We could talk about all the yards you've thrown for, all the great ability that you've done. But in my opinion, I'm just a 64-year-old guy from the 901, Memphis, Tennessee. And my thing is, I want to see whether or not you won that championship. Dan Marino, I'm sorry. You don't have that ring. Jim McMahon got that ring. That's why I asked that gentleman right here on the screen today, what would it mean to have a Super Bowl ring? You can fool yourself and go around, oh, I threw for all the yards and all the numerous playoff games and we won big. But when it's something, when you hold that trophy as a champion, that's something that's never going to go away, man. Final words today, Mr. Harper LaBelle, about your former teammate, one of the best to ever done it at the quarterback position in the college level and the NFL level, Jim McMahon.
Yeah, as I said, he was a foe initially. Gosh, at Colorado State, we couldn't stand BYU, but you respected them. And part of the reason is they were so good. And they were so good because of Jim McMahon, at least when he was a part of their history. They went on to be great without him on other teams, and they won a national championship, a co-national championship later on. But Jim certainly took them to a completely different level. He did so with the Bears. He won another championship with Green Bay. I love the fact that Jim was able to read the field as good as anybody has ever been able to do so and get the ball to the guy that it needs to go to. He would run your offense. Near the end of his career, he couldn't do it the same way. He did get beat up. Oh, my goodness. His neck was broken. He played with a broken neck. It's 32 degrees out of the angle. I know this as a fact. I know the doctor who's worked on him. I truly am amazed at some of the things that he was able to do. But Vincent spoke about his toughness. There's no question. He played hurt. He played when he was wounded. He played when he shouldn't have played. He played with broken bones. So he has my respect, and I hope that he has yours as well. Jim McMahon is a guy that I consider a friend. He's a great teammate when we were together in Philadelphia, but he's also a guy that has earned my respect year after year for the things that he did to help to make the game of football better.
If you like the video one more time, please comment and share it. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. Joining me today has been the legend, the savant, California YA, Colorado State legend, Mr. Harper LaBelle. What can we say? This morning has been on fire. We've done 2 videos, one on Reggie White and one on Jim McMahon. And after you leave us today, hopefully, there's a lot of respect for both of these gentlemen that played in the National Football League at a high level and also in the college game. So enjoy the rest of the week here on 100 Yards of Football. And my final saying is this. We're broadcasting live out of the Metro Atlanta area. Alabama, y'all won the first one. Remember, you had to score 41 points. I still say Georgia is the better team. Y'all enjoy the morning here on 100 Yards of Football. And catch us on Wednesdays. As we got a special guest, we're not going to put it out there who we got coming up on 100 Yards of Football on Wednesday, but we will have our college football Super 7, our NFL previews, and our special NFL draft prospects. Y'all be blessed here on 100 Yards of Football.